course. So, but you got hints. I know you got information as well. You'll tell us more about what is really happening and what also the splashes on the dailies are talking about, the dynasty, like the Daily Nation today, dynasty or dynasties versus hustlers as well. Who are the dynasties? Who are the hustlers? And also there's a very revealing also headline on the Star as well. We'll give you more details of that much later in the course of the program as we eagerly wait for the panelists. But in the meantime, we can actually get a sneak peek of what is on the front pages of the dailies today. Beginning with the Daily Nation, this is what is on the front page of the Daily Nation today. Dynasties versus hustlers. A KANU MP excited at budding alliance of Gideon and Raila defines the 2022 races in starkly memorable terms. A fight between dynasties established wealthy political families and hustlers upstarts trying to crush the party. You have the full report here on page 4, 5 and 6 of today's Daily Nation. KANU wild with glee at the prospect of Odinga opening the doors of power to the party he helped defeat in 2002. And you can see the front, or also the front page of the Daily Nation is holding those faces of President Uhuru Kenyatta, Baringo Senator Gideon Moi, ODM leader Raila Odinga and Deputy President William Ruto. Also, 37 suspects face fresh charges in NYS trial is another story that you want to follow on the front page of the Daily Nation today. New charges have been brought against 37 suspects facing trial over the loss of 231,942,758,000 at the National Youth Service. The prosecution said the amount is part of 8 billion shillings believed to have been stolen through illegal payments. This story, you can follow it at the back page of the Daily Nation today. Also, is a big day for our students, or our pupils, I should say, getting ready for the finish line. And we can see here a candidate at Nyamachaki Primary School in Nyeri go through their rehearsals yesterday. There will be among 1,060,759 pupils countrywide who will sit the test from today. And this story continues on page 2. We wish them success. They've been studying very hard, and this is it. We pray for them today that they sail through successfully. And also, we have the Star for you, and this is what is on the front page of the Star. Debt fears of a new 250 billion shillings Eurobond. Local and external loans and grants to fill 622 billion budget shortfall. Treasury PS Kamau Thuge confirms plan to borrow despite experts warning. And this story continues on page 4 of the Star today. Is this the way to go? This will be part of our discussion today as well. Are we settled with so much as far as debt is concerned? They say that we've not really crossed the red line. And here we're gagging for another 250 billion shillings Eurobond. Of course, we know the first and the second Eurobond were very controversial. And we never got any clarity as far as that money or how it was spent. So this is also bound to spark a lot of debate as well. Do you think we should go this way? That's another story. And also remember, they're also looking forward for the Sukuk loan, right? The Sukuk bond, I should say. And that is another facet also of the bond as well. So this is what is on the front page of the Star today. Debt fears over new 250 billion shillings Eurobond. Treasury PS Kamau Thuge confirms plan to borrow despite experts warning. And this story continues on page 4 of the Star this morning. Mount Kenya MPs to meet Uhuru over succession. Behind the scenes maneuvers and fears over widening cracks in President Uhuru Kenyatta's Mount Kenya backyard yesterday forced more than 70 MPs from the region to drop their 2022 succession talk. The Star established the sharp differences among opposing factions during the politicians in Naivasha retreat was the reason they snapped debate on Uhuru's possible successor and his post-retirement role. That is what we have on the front page also of the Star this morning. And the KCP candidates ready for examination today is another story that you want to follow. Aga Khan Primary School pupils in Mombasa during rehearsals yesterday. You can see them here, and it says over 1,060,759 candidates countrywide begin the exams today. You can follow this story also inside the Star. High security exam scary. These are voices, but also drama at KNH as nurses resist bid to arrest medics is another story that you want to follow there on page 2. MP Savula Itemere out on bond over 122 million shillings scandal. Auditor General pokes holes in 50 billion shillings contract. This is the Kenya pipeline contract, and you can follow this story on page 6 of the Star this morning. I want to show you what we have on the front page of the People Daily. You have forsaken us, Mount Kenya MPs tell Uhuru. More than 70 lawmakers from central region say electorate unhappy with Jubilee for failing to implement projects. Alleged president favors other areas. This story continues on page 6 of the People Daily this morning. Also still on the front page of the People Daily, it's all systems go for exams. And this story continues on page 4 and 5 of the People Daily this morning. I want to show you also what we have on the front page of the Standard. I don't have my soft copy, but we have the hard copy with us. Uhuru succession stars Mount Kenya bloke. It says this is a splash on the front page of the Standard, and you can see them here. Mount Kenya Parliamentary Group Chairperson Cecily Mbarire with other leaders addressing the press after their retreat at an Naivasha hotel yesterday. And the current, at least 70 MPs with roots in Mount Kenya Regional held a 2-day closed-door meeting in Naivasha in which Uhuru succession, the upcoming census and proposed parliamentary system of government featured. And we have this story continuing on page 6 of the Standard this morning. Another man held as Obado returns to work. Murder suspect governors chairs county cabinet meeting while man police claim hired vehicle used by Sharon Otieno killers appears in Kiambu court. And you can follow this story on page 12 of the Standard this morning. Also, Raila's first assignment as African Union diplomat. Former Prime Minister paid a courtesy call on the new Partnership for Africa's Development CEO in South Africa on his first engagement as a special AU envoy. You have this story on page 6 of the Standard this morning. Let's see what we have on the front page of the Business Daily, and this is what you're waking up to today. Safaricom's stake in Kenyan economy rises to 543 billion shillings. Telecom's operators' contribution in the year to March equivalent to 6.5% of the country's GDP. Telecom's operator Safaricom deepened its contribution to the Kenyan economy in the year ended March 2018, having grown its value chain by 57 billion shillings to 543 billion shillings. The company's latest annual sustainability report says, and you have a story on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. Also, taxpayers may have lost 11 billion shillings in NYS scams. Kenyan taxpayers may have lost more than 11 billion shillings in the 2 mega scandals at the National Youth Service that have seen more than 30 public officials charged in court. Assistant Director of Public Prosecutions Gitonga Ryungu told the court that the suspects employed similar tricks to defraud the public of valuable resources in both the scandals popularly known as NYS-1 and NYS-2. This story continues on page 4 of the Business Daily. KQ direct flight from US lands at 10:30 a.m. The return leg of Kenya Airways' inaugural non-stop flight to New York is expected to end in Nairobi this morning, completing the first round of the debut on the route that is expected to boost the airline's revenues and support its path to recovery. This story continues on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. Also, still on the front page of the Business Daily, 6 new groups eye Kakuzi land. 6 more groups are laying claim to the NSE-listed agricultural farm Kakuzi Public Limited land, putting more pressure on the company that is already in court fighting a group that wants 39,323 acres of its property. This story continues on page 7 of the Business Daily. 240 million shillings of debt West End Hotel owners is said to have defaulted. That is on page 20. Also, Kenya leads in HR capital race. Kenya is poised to produce Africa's most productive human capital in the medium term, a World Bank survey shows, buoyed by the country's present deep investment in healthcare and child education. This story is tucked away on page 12 and 13 of the Business Daily. Housing investors to cherry-pick locations. Private sector players looking to participate in the provision of affordable housing are likely to favor areas with well-developed support infrastructure due to cost implications. This is according to a new report, and we have the story on page 19 of the Business Daily this morning. Taifa Leo is up next, and this is the splash. Mahindi tele ugali gali. That is what we have on the front page of Taifa Leo. Mahindi tele ugali gali. NCPB yadinda kuuza mahindi kwa wasagaji kama serikali ilivyoahidi, na sasa bei kugonga 100. That is the story that you have on the front page of the Taifa Leo. You have it continuing on page 2, and you can see also a related picture there on the front page of the Taifa Leo. We cross over now to Tanzania. We have the Citizen Tanzania up in key governance index. The country has climbed 3 positions in the overall ranking of the Mo Ibrahim Index of African Governance to 14th and is third in East Africa. This story continues on page 2 of the Citizen this morning. And also tributes after Leicester City owner killed in chopper crash. The Thai billionaire was among 5 people killed when his helicopter crashed and burst into flames in the Premier League side's stadium car park on Saturday. You have this story on page 26 of the Citizen this morning. Also, VP opens industrial exhibition in Coast. Vice President Samla Suluhu Hassan receives a gift here from Coast Regional Commissioner Everest Ndikilo after officially opening an industrial exhibition in Kibaha, Coast Region yesterday. This story continues on page 3 of the Citizen this morning. Also, mixed views greet government position on cashew nuts. That story on page 2 of the Citizen. And looking at the side, but they're pushed to back small EA medicine companies. East African Community member states say they are on course to adopting a policy that requires all public procurement agencies to buy at least 50% of the drugs requirement from the region. Currently, in East Africa, local drug producers enjoy a 15% price preference over foreign firms, suggesting that a local production firm still qualifies to win public tenders, even if it quotes a price that is up to 15% higher than a foreign drug supplier. That story also tucked away on page 2 of the Citizen in Tanzania. Still there in Tanzania, we have Mwananchi for you, and this is what you're waking up to today. Mitikisho wa korosho, it says, wadau wasema zao hilo ndilo linaloingizia taifa mapato makubwa, and you have that story on page 4 of the Mwananchi. Chadema yajipanga kisawa sawa 2020. That is what we have also on the front page of Mwananchi. Let's see what is happening also in Rwanda. Government tracks genocide fugitives to enforce judgment. Government is working diligently and thoroughly to track down the more than 1,000 Gasasa convicts, I should say, who didn't serve their sentence, but officials have said it's a task being carefully done to avoid mistakes. That is what we have on the front page also of the New Times in Rwanda. Also, BK issues 20 million new shares. Private Sector Federation Chairman Robert Pab Fukurera and Bank of Kigali Chief Executive Diane Karusisi, we can see them here officially launching BK rights issue at Marriott Hotel in Kigali yesterday. At the event, Bank of Kigali Group reiterated plans to trade shares on Nairobi Stock Exchange. And you have this story also on page 10 of the New Times in Rwanda. 500 girls get varsity scholarship for science courses is another story tucked away on page 8 of the New Times in Rwanda. A Greek body to disinfect ponds in Musanze. Find solution to defilement drugs rights body tells government. You have the story on page 17 of the New Times in Rwanda. Let's continue and see also what we have in the East African this week, and this is what we have on the front page of the East African this week. Paradox of profitable train leaving misery in its tracks, steaming ahead as SGR records booming business with increased cargo volumes, but the ticket prices, job and business losses. This story continue on page 8 of the East African. Let's move on and see what we have also down there. Francophonie is good for East Africa. Newly elected Secretary General of the Organization of French-Speaking Countries, Ms. Louise Mushikiwabo says the OIF will bring social and economic benefits to the entire region. Let's move on. We see also what we have on the front page of the international editions there. We have the Financial Times, and this is what is on the front page of the Financial Times. More victims in synagogue were elderly. The man accused of murdering 11 congregants in a Pittsburgh synagogue told police he wanted all Jews to die. Authorities alleged yesterday as the names of those killed in the deadliest attack against Jews on U.S. soil were released by medical examiners. And this story continues on page 3. You can see a related picture here. Federal prosecutor Scott Brady here revealing details of the shooting at the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh. Also, McHale Party's election setback threatens to rock Berlin coalition. CDU humbled in Hesse. Social Democrats also suffer. Polarization in Europe deepens. And this story continues also inside the Financial Times. Somming warns Deutsche managers that tie-up rumor is no excuse for failure. Is another story that you want to follow also on the front page of the Financial Times. Of course, the difference of time notwithstanding, this is what we have as the latest for us. Let's move on and we see what we have also on the front page of The Economist. If you've not grabbed a copy of The Economist, this is how it looks, the latest edition there. Aussie rules, it says, what Australia can teach the world. You can grab a copy there of The Economist. Trump and the Caravan, how to protect Brazil's democracy, the case against gender self-ID, drone deliveries take off. And this is the latest of The Economist. Let's see what we have also on the front page of the Time magazine. Just briefly to just show you what also it holds for us. Allow me to just grab it quickly for you so that you can see what it holds for you. And this is what is on the front page of the Time magazine, the international edition. When war comes home, in a remote Afghan village, one explosion changed a family forever. And you can see all of them, how they were adversely affected by these. Well, most of them are other-abled right now. And this is what is on the front page of the international edition of the Time magazine. And the US edition looks like this. You can grab a copy. This is a double issue. Guns in America, a Time and JR project. That is the latest. Okay, let's see what we do have as editorial cartoons. This is what we have in the Daily Nation today. Best wishes to KCP candidates. Of course, we wish them well. We pray for them today as they're going to sit for the exams. And that is what Munene also has drawn for them. And we do have Gado as well here. And this is what is happening in South Sudan right now. Both sets of difficulties can be eliminated. Set 1, problems. Set 2, corruption. Set 1, you have ignorance, hunger, and disease. And set 2, you have Kir Machar and the generals. All of this can be eliminated. This is what has been captured by Gado inside the Standard today. Also, we have Stano in the People Daily. And this is how the corruption doc looks today, right? The latest, of course, kid on the block there is a government agency, advertising agency. And he's saying, sorry, Your Honor, for coming late. Others are still on the way. So you can see there we have NYS, NCPB, Ministry of Health, KPLC, or Kenya Power, and KPL as well. And finally, let's see also what Victor has drawn for us. Right, I'll show you what Victor has drawn for us also. And that is just about to wish the candidates as well success as they're sitting for the exams today. I'll try and lift that quickly for you so that you can see what is here. There we go. This is what Victor has done for us as well. No pressure. It's only an exam, I was told. Right. And this is what we have as editorial cartoons. Also, just want to show you what we have from our archives today. Right. Also, President Moi there with pupils. Right. He was also a leader who really emphasized the need for education in the country. And this is what is from our archives, courtesy of our library and Maria Kanini Wambua, who has also given us that particular picture. Right, you can grab a copy of the dailies for those riveting stories and also other dailies as well, or the international magazines for the riveting, compelling stories as well. For now, the highlights. Lugari MP, his 2 wives and 26 others plead not guilty to fraud charges. In Nigeria, military fires at shrine to Muslims. U.S. troops ordered to Mexico border to await migrant caravan. Good morning. Lugari Member of Parliament Ayub Savula, his 2 wives and 26 employees from the Ministry of Information, Communication and Technology appeared in court to answer to charges of conspiracy to defraud the government more than 122,35,500 shillings. The more than 20 suspects pleaded not guilty and were released on cash bail of between 1 million and 2 million shillings each. They are set to appear again in court on the 4th of December to set the date for the trial, which will commence next year. Ken Mijungu starts us off.
Ayub Savula, a second-time Member of Parliament, his wives Melody Getwiri Ringera and Helen Jepkor Kemboi, the Principal Secretary and the Accounting Officer at the Ministry of ICT, Sami Ishundu Itemere, Director of Government Advertising Agency, Dennis Chebitwe, and the Secretary Dixon Onyala Nyadiga and Administrative Secretary Henry Musanga Mungasia were among 20 others who appeared before Nairobi's Chief Magistrate, Francis Andanyi, where they promptly denied the charges of conspiracy to defraud the government 122,335,500 shillings. Defense lawyers applied for bail, which was not opposed by the prosecution. Aside from Savula and his 2 wives were released on a 1 million shilling cash bail or 2 million shilling bond and surety of the same amount, the rest was slapped with 2 million shillings bail each. Savula was, however, required to deposit an additional 500,000 shillings in cash since he took plea as the director of the companies involved.
That accused person, Helen
Savula is accused of jointly with others who were not before court without lawful authority, citing a false requisition letter to the Ministry of Health purporting to have been signed by an officer from the ministry. He's also accused of attempting to obtain 119 million shillings from the Ministry of Information, Communication and Technology by falsely pretending that they were in a position to offer advertising services in a newspaper with wider circulation. The companies allegedly in the middle of the scandal are the Sunday Publisher, Maslav Company, John Newton Communications, the Express Media Group, No Bands Protection Agency Limited, Cross Convenient Ventures Limited, and Sheldoc Limited.
We'll have to compromise here because...
The magistrate also ordered the prosecution to furnish the defense with copies of their case, including evidence they intend to rely on by Tuesday morning. The pretrial hearing is set for early December. Ken Mijungu, NTV.
And 4 suspects who had been charged in the 468 million shillings National Youth Service scandal will now be state witnesses when the trial begins on Wednesday, 31st of October. The Director of Public Prosecutions, Rudin Haji, has also withdrawn charges against 8 accused persons for lack of evidence, but at the same time added 5 new witnesses to testify against the accused, who include former Youth and Gender Principal Secretary Lilian Omolo, together with the former NYS Director General Richard Debarl.
We exercised our constitutional powers.
The lead prosecutor, Joseph Riungu, who is also the Assistant Director of Public Prosecution, told the court that he has dropped charges against 8 persons, namely Clara Mbau, Christopher Malala, Josephat Njoroge, Rogers Nzioka, Lucas Otieno, Sami Michuki, Simon Kiilu, and Stephen Mushai under Section 87A of the Criminal Procedure Code. However, the 8 can be charged afresh if the prosecution finds further evidence linking them to the NYS scandal. The prosecutor has also revealed to the court that 4 accused persons, namely Rogers Nzioka, Lucas Otieno, Josephat Njoroge and Stephen Mushai, have turned state witnesses. The prosecution revealed that it has obtained additional statements from a number of persons and entities, namely Lucas Otieno, Stanley Kanangwaya and Issa John from the National Treasury, internal auditors report from the Auditor General's Office, Florence Kuhemba, who is the current head of finance at the National Treasury, documents examiners report, IFMI's report from Treasury, bank statements from KCB, Equity and National Bank, as well as a statement from the investigating officer, Paul Waweru. The prosecution further consolidated 4 out of 10 files, with the accused persons taking plea afresh to charges involving 82 counts. The prosecution added an additional charge, namely money laundering, involving a total of 73 million shillings against Ann Ngirita and Lucy Ngirita, together with their companies. However, the defense team, led by lawyers Stephen Liguna and Cliff Ombeta, representing former PS Lilian Omolo and Richard Ndubai, respectively, opposed the prosecutor's submission, stating that they were not served with recorded statements as per the requirement of the pre-trial.
This time it does not look bad on us. And things will be said about the judiciary. Today you don't need to worry about it, because the delay that is going to come about is as a result of the prosecution.
The challenge to be nothing is that, Your Honor, we do not know the physical addresses. And I can name a few of those.
Prosecution is warned against behaving in a manner like today, where they have led to an adjournment which should not have been the case.
Chief Magistrate Douglas Ogoti ordered the prosecution to submit all the necessary additions to the case to the defense team by 11 a.m. Tuesday and set 31st Wednesday as the new date for the trial. It's now 5 months since the case started, but the hearing has never taken off, with Chief Magistrate Douglas Ogoti issuing a final warning to all respondents to submit the necessary documentation that will kick off the trial. Seth Olale, NTV, Milimani Law Courts.
And a Migori County government employee arraigned in a Kiambu court in connection with the murder of Rongo University student Sharon Otieno. Grado Ochola, who was arrested on Friday in Migori town, is the latest suspect to face charges related to the murder of a student, which took place in August this year. He was produced before Kiambu Chief Magistrate Patricia Gichoi, where detectives applied to be allowed to continue holding him for 14 days. Migori Governor Okoth Opado was released on bail last week, awaiting the commencement of the pre-trial hearings.
Has been adversely mentioned in connection to the murder, in that having procured the motor vehicle registration number KCF 419F that dropped the killers from Migori to Longo Township.
Mount Kenya MPs say they are thoroughly dissatisfied with the performance of cabinet secretaries from the region, whom they blame for what they call the president's dismal development record in Mount Kenya. According to the MPs who had retreated to Naivasha for a 2-day retreat, the cabinet secretaries are not coming. They're not coming or forthcoming. The MPs have demanded that the Jubilee government focuses on developing regions that overwhelmingly voted for President Uhuru Kenyatta's second term in office. NTV's political affairs reporter Kennedy Muridhi with more.
Their meeting in Naivasha for the last 2 days comes as a culmination of issues that have been boiling beneath their sleeves. According to the over 70 MPs who met in Naivasha, their neglect by the same government the people they represent overwhelmingly supported to ascend to power is evident, and they will no longer remain silent.
Mount Kenya region must claim its rightful share of development in the country within the remaining 4 years of this current administration.
The region has 6 cabinet secretaries whom they are turning the heat on. ICT-CS Joe Musheru, who was sent by President Uhuru Kenyatta on Sunday night to listen to the legislators' grievances and report back to him. Transport, Housing and Infrastructure CS James Masharia, Health CS Cecily Karaoke, Trade and Industrialization CS Peter Munya, Youth and Gender Affairs CS Margaret Kobia, and Agriculture CS Mwangi Kionjori. Sources who attended the meeting told NTV that the CSs have become unavailable and they are giving the president a bad name on the ground.
We know that Mount Kenya region contributes over 60% of our country's GDP. Yet only 20% comes back to its people. We have therefore called upon the Commission of Revenue Allocation, CRA, Parliament and other relevant agencies to ensure that the region gets its fair share of resources when it comes to development and implementation of the second generation formula.
The leaders are expected to meet President Uhuru Kenyatta at the end of this week, where they will present their resolutions from the meeting formally.
That we have identified development priorities for our region, and in particular with regards to the following key issues. Matters regarding water, roads, electricity, and agriculture.
The MPs have also blamed the National Assembly leadership, led by Speaker Justin Muturi, of being slow to attend to their needs, especially when presented in Parliament and focusing on other regions. The legislators further want President Uhuru Kenyatta to honor a promise he made in 2013, where he requested that he develops other parts of the country within his first term in office, then turn attention to those places that overwhelmingly voted for him within his second term in office. These places include the Central Kenya. Kennedy Mureithi, NTV in Naivasha, Nakuru County.
And of course also that story about dismal performance of the cabinet secretaries, not just from the Mount Kenya region, but also just entirety as a cabinet was a very comprehensive story in the Daily Nation. This is the Sunday Nation, I should say, on this was on page 4. Eyes on Uhuru cabinet as shake-up speculation rises. The president is furious and disappointed, starring debate on competence choice of senior officers. And this is a well-fleshed out story here on page 4 by Patrick Langat and Walter Menye as well. This is from the Sunday Nation. This previous, of course, the latest Sunday Nation, where it was the moment of truth for top politicians. This is what is, of course, they are alluding to as well. But we want just to also hear from our panelists this morning about that particular move. Right now, everyone is talking about referendum and how also we should try and tweak the constitution so that it can suit us to the ground as it is right now. It has not really shaken into place, so it seems, and that's why everyone is really gagging for this particular referendum to happen. We have with us this morning Dr. Iseli Simiu, who is a member of parliament from Tongaren. We introduced him at the top of the hour. Also, we do have with us Senator Aaron Cheriot from Kericho. Also, we introduced him at the top of the hour. Also, we do have with us this morning Dr. Otende Amolo, who is a member of parliament from Marieda. We have Jacob Midio as well, who is the former member of parliament from GEM, and also the former senator of Kakamega and the deputy leader of Ford Kenya as well this morning. Welcome, gentlemen. Good morning.
Good morning.
Right, I hope you maybe skimmed through on the Daily Nation or the Sunday Nation for that matter, and this story of what is the competence, Sunday Nation, what is the competence of the cabinet secretaries. We thought that the technocrats, if they are apolitical, then they will be given, that particular chance and a room to swing their cart and perform very well. But as it is, from those statements we've had from Mount Kenya's legislators, it seems, yes, the cabinet secretaries are not performing. Let's begin with you, Aaron Cheriot, on this.
I think, well, good morning, Kenya, first of all, and good morning, Debarl and my colleagues. I completely agree with that narrative, that the thinking that led to this creation of a cabinet secretary position, where we have apolitical people of what was then referred to as corporate background, and not any political background will give us a better running system of government. I think having tested that system for now 8 years, there's no room for doubt in my mind that the current crop and organization of ministers from that kind of background perform far worse than we used to have when politicians, that is members of parliament, were cabinet minister.
Yes.
Part of the reason I say that is, one, the issue of, first of all, general understanding of how government works and how our politics is organized and how you go out and have life meaning and impacting projects in the society. Because if you have, say, a member of parliament, say if Seli or Tiende here will be a colleague in cabinet with Jakoyo, when they meet and they need to discuss things, at least they do it from a perspective of being representatives of people, and therefore they know the kind of demands that people have of them. I totally understand the feeling that many people are beginning to get nowadays, because when you report back, for example, when I go to Kericho over the weekends, as is expected of me as a politician, the kind of questions I have to answer about roads, about water, about electricity, you know, it's so much, yet the people that are charged with that responsibility are most of the time inaccessible to us. I don't know, maybe my colleagues might be luckier than myself, but to access them might be a bit difficult. And you end up, because you're in a gathering with people and they need this or that explanation about why things are not moving in the correct order. Secondly, also, is just the complete out of touch reality attitude that you get with certain cabinet secretaries. Even a good number in this current cabinet, leave alone the last one. You see the way they make certain decisions when they go out to speak in public. It's completely embarrassing. Last week I was at the Lake Region Economic Bloc, and there seated at the front was the president and his deputy, and one of the cabinet ministers that had accompanied them, actually Eugene Omalo to be specific. And then he went on to make what I'd consider to be an extremely naive joke, because he was speaking to a crowd who, one of the things that they felt the president ought to address them about was this, you know, about the Mao debacle. Then he comes and makes fun of it and say, by the way, we must conserve Mao by all means. It's a right statement to make, but is it politically correct? They ended up embarrassing the president, and it looked so awkward. When people left, they were discussing and wondering, who was that fellow that came and appeared before us? What was he telling us? Because conserve Mao is a political, it has political connotations, you know.
At whatever cost.
How people listen to it is that the cabinet secretary actually is telling members of that particular community that you must, we will evict you out of that forest whether you like it or not, whether you have titles or you don't. Same kind of attitude I see from Keriako Tobiko when he goes to the president backyard and uproots water infrastructure that has been there for the last 50 years. Even if you have a dispute with them, a proper cabinet secretary who understands how systems of governments work, the first thing you would have done is at least engage the leaders from that region and say, there's this initiative that you want to do, ladies and gentlemen, we must do it this way.
Right. Dr. Eseli, do you agree with, of course, that view that, yeah, the performing dismally, that is the cabinet secretaries, and of course also we had an impression that if we get technocrats, then we'll have stellar performance coming from the cabinet secretaries, but it seems that was wrong-headed from the go-getting.
I think the idea of getting technocrats might have been sound, but are they technocrats? All of them. The fellows appointed to those cabinet positions, are they really technocrats? But another issue which we should not lose sight of is that the apparent non-performance of these people is a reflection of the way the Jubilee reconstituted their administration, in the sense that people with experience, with knowledge on how to run certain dockets were actually shunted aside. Sometimes based on matters which were neither here nor there, and in fact we used to suspect at one point that was actually ethnic, so that you find loss of good people who would have actually assisted this government to deliver. Some were actually shunted aside and put in dockets where they have got no clue. I mean, there's nothing that they are doing there. Like I remember they reshuffled the Ministry of Health at one time, and the senior people who knew how to run matters, one of them was dumped in KMTC in an non-existent position. So, and I remember even the Treasury, when Waiguru took over as the minister, she shunted around people. In fact, I know two very knowledgeable people who had been actually Waiguru seniors, and they shunted them around and they quit. One of them ended up with Price Waterhouse. Another one ended up with one of these consultancy companies, because they were virtually shunted out. So the fact that these ministers are not performing is not a reflection of the ministers alone, the CSS alone. It is just that the way they reshuffled people around and lost the key people who actually know how to run government. Because remember, a minister or a cabinet secretary does not do the day-to-day running of the ministries. It is actually these technocrats in the ministry that do that work. So when you have a minister who is coming from the corporate world, not from the public service, you have a PS who is coming from the corporate world, not from the public service. They actually have no clue how the public service works. And then you have removed the people who could have assisted them deliver. And the reasons why you removed them are neither here nor there. They are not justified. That is the cause of this apparent failure. It is not that these particular people are not performing. They just don't have the backing, good quality backing of the public service technocrats to show them the ropes of how to deliver. So that's what's leading to this failure. It's not because remember, some of them have been politicians. Some of the people have been made CSs. How come they are not performing also? It's because they don't have the right quality of people to work with. Your ministry is as good as the people you have. If the people you have in the ministry have got no clue what they are supposed to do, and have been given those jobs not because of ability, but because of other reasons other than merit, then you have got you are being backed by people who can't help you, and that is what's happening here. This is what I call it: the chickens have come home to roost on the Jubilee mismanagement.
All right, thank you. Okay, well, maybe should we now revert to the previous structure that we had, that members of parliament now will also hold those ministerial positions? Let's hear from Dr. Otene Amolo.
Thank you, Debarl. Before I venture into that subject, let me first wish the over 1 million candidates sitting KCP today every success, and particularly the candidates in my constituents, including my daughter, who is sitting today. But second, let me also condole with Kalonzo Musyoka on the loss of his father, and get every well wish for my colleague Dr. Pamela Odhiambo, who lost his bodyguard and is still in his hospital in a fairly difficult situation. Having said that, I think the question that belies this idea of the cabinet, sometimes people speak to it and they do not know that by what they say, they are actually agreeing with things they sometimes don't agree with. To consider whether we should still have cabinet secretaries from parliament or outside parliament is to revisit the question of the system of government that we have. And so when Senator Cheriot says that he believes that maybe we should revert to that, by that statement, he is unwittingly supporting the call for changing the constitution and changing the system of government. And there is considerable merit in that kind of thinking. But first, let me agree with my colleagues who've spoken that there's a sense in which the idea that we had in the constitution may not have worked. But it's not that the idea itself was bad. It is that the execution has been bad. To say the truth, first of all, while the initial batch of cabinet secretaries, when President Kibaki came in, were more of technocrats, we have seen that the current batch are more politicians. And even they practice politics in their daily utterances and what they do. So strictly speaking, the original idea may have been bastardized. Secondly, the other thing that is wrong is that those who are appointed believe that as long as the president is happy, it does not matter if any other Kenyan is unhappy. And this has been reflected in the kind of talk and action we've seen from a number of cabinet secretaries. But thirdly, their mode of appointment has also denied the opportunity for them to feel that they are accountable, including the fact that all the cabinet secretaries, as they were appointed, and because Jubilee had the numbers and has had the numbers, they've had to be endorsed almost wholesome, without question. And some of the people complaining, like my brother Cheruiyot here, although he's in Senate, but those of them who have been in the National Assembly, in this 12th Parliament, in the 11th Parliament, did not allow themselves to exercise their free thought in terms of vetting and to determine, is this person suitable or not? But it's even worse that those who then were continuing, there was some misleading legal advice that was given, and yet it came to pass that you do not have to be vetted afresh. That is completely illegal. Any person who is serving after any election must be brought to be vetted afresh, just the same way even the president himself had to take a fresh oath of office. Now, the situation has not been helped by the introduction of this animal called the Chief Administrative Secretary, who I would sympathize even with the cabinet secretary who wants to perform, that you are here, you've been given some task, some nebulous animal called Chief Administrative Secretary has been introduced, some of whom are quite active in confusing matters in the ministry. And then you also have a principal secretary who sometimes takes directions from persons other than within the ministry. So the entire situation is a bit untidy, and I agree that it might need to be examined. It may not be automatically because of the system, but it is time to relook at it. If we want to relook, and I'm one of those, and I've said this all the time, that we may now want to actually consider a proper parliamentary system. And in a proper parliamentary system, the very wishes of having cabinet secretaries who are from parliament and therefore accountable to the people through parliament works much better.
Right, let's hear from Jakao Medio.
Yeah, well, Debarl, good morning. I don't think there's much to say about that. I think we are in agreement. We must reform our system of government. And the longer we take before doing it, the worse things will get. You know, I rue the misuse of the word technocrat. What qualification that the Minister for Sports have? I mean, even he couldn't produce papers during his interview, even fake ones. you know. So what are you telling?
Are you in any way endorsing fake papers for
No, I am not.
Some people might misconstrue what you're saying this morning.
No. I am not.
Yeah, that,
I said even fake one. You know, sometimes just pretend. Kidogo. Yeah, an ID and birth certificate. So those are the kind of ministers we have. I must say here now that I was very impressed with Matiang'i when he was Minister for Education. I think there is also people are misplaced in the jobs that they have been given. But I want to say that the ideal situation which we have been used for, whatever the correct expression, but we've been used to having ministers in parliament. I think it is a very ideal situation. I remember when we would have very senior politicians as ministers, Michukis, Karumes, all those people, Chai, you would meet them in parliament. When you have an issue that concerns your constituency, you discuss over tea. But I can tell you now that of the nearly 20 ministers, I only know Eugene Wamalwa, I only know Fred Matiang'i, I know Amina, but just maximum 5. They are just there, they're freeloaders. Those are people who are in the wrong place. These are political jobs. They need politicians, supervised by politicians, to be the ones doing them. I can tell you, we tried to do too much with our constitution. And we have implemented somebody called technocrat. You know, all these people, even including this panel, everybody here is a technocrat. But you cannot tell me that of the 20 or so ministers, you have anybody there who can face politicians. Because politicians, by their very nature, by the nature of the job, they must be slowed down. And if you pick people from the streets, which is what we have, you have parallel systems. In my view, we must revisit our constitution in many ways, many ways, so that we can have a system that we can afford, a system that we can contain. Because, for example, if Utedi Amolo today was a minister, or Dr. Eseli Simiyu or Aaron Cheriot, because they are members of parliament, then we would not have to pay two people two different salaries to do the same job. What we have now is a bloated wage bill because of systemic problems. I think we need to restructure our government and deal with it the way our people can accept and the way our people know. I think the sooner the better, Debarl.
The sooner the better. Let's hear from Boni Halwale. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. And I want to take this opportunity to wish our children well and success as they sit their exams. Before I comment, allow me to plead with this panel that if we must criticize the education of people who are not here, including ministers, we should also tell the country our own education and background. There is nowhere in the Constitution of Kenya where it demands that a minister must be a PhD holder or what have you. So if Parliament found that Rashid Mohammed was fit to be minister, Jacob Midio has no justification whatsoever to describe Rashid Mohammed in the manner he's doing. Maybe next time when we come, Jacob Midio, it would help the country if you could come with a complete resume of your own background. Like on this panel, I hear you call my brother, Honorable Otienda Amolo, a doctor. It might help for us to know whether he has got a PhD in law. And if he has, we see that evidence. It is irresponsible for us to cast aspersions against Rashid Mohammed just to suit your own political biases and interests.
All right, and
now to comment on what you asked me. I want to disagree that having been appointed as technocrats is a reason why some of the ministers have failed. I know in that cabinet...
But who is a technocrat anyway? Maybe we actually just... who is a technocrat?
I believe a technocrat is somebody who has got some expertise, trained, examined and qualified in an area of expert.
Trained, examined and qualified in an area...
In an area of expert.
Of experts.
Yes.
And this is what Jaco is actually asking, if he's actually a technocrat. If given that grid that you've given us, does he really pass muster?
But there's nowhere in the dictionary, in the constitution where they say that the minister should be that.
Okay, in the constitution, I think that is beyond my ken, and you can help me, Dr. Otiende. Is the word technocrats seen alongside the cabinet secretary?
No.
No, not at all.
That is not there. That is the assumption.
That is the assumption.
Inherent in once you removed the cabinet secretaries from being from parliament.
Yeah, then they are supposed to be a technocrats. Yes. Continue, sir.
So if I may continue, I think we must also appreciate that in the current cabinet, which some people think has not worked very well, we also have politicians, and allow me to name just 6 who have come on my mind very quickly. We have John Munyes, former senator for Turkana, Najib Balala, former MP of Mvita, Charles Keter, former senator and MP of Belgut, Wamalo Kijana, Eugene Wamalwa, former MP of Saboti, Mwangi Chunjuri, former MP and minister, and then we have got Peter Munya. So if the political background was the reason why they should succeed, then how come when Waiguru, who when she went into cabinet, she had never been elected, when she went into office, she defined the Ministry of Devolution. You could see the Ministry of Devolution, you could feel the Ministry of Devolution, you could hear it. But today a politician, Eugene Wamalwa, is in the same ministry, and that ministry has disappeared. Pardon?
Far fewer dockets
Yes.
than what we
So,
what,
and then if you take the case of the technocrat like my brother-in-law Matiang'i. Matiang'i is not a politician, but he was very, very visible, and many of us think he succeeded at the Ministry of Education. So to me, the key is not whether you are a politician or a technocrat. The key is in the vetting process that is provided for in the Constitution. If the vetting process was up to it, then on vetting day, we would see what we see in the United States, i.e., we see a report of the National Intelligence Service on an appointee. It be made clear. We see the report of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission on the proposed appointee. We see the report of the Justice and Legal Committee of Parliament. And finally, we hear the National Assembly speak. So because these parameters miss in vetting, people who are not that suitable for some of the positions end up taking up those positions. Probably if this was emphasized, then you can capture what is unwritten, but what could be the very spirit of the Constitution of Kenya. The spirit was ministries should be populated by people who will add value, not people who will just be passengers.
All right. So as we're closing on it, yeah, you want to get a rejoinder there?
Yes, because he was accusing me for being uneducated. So
I never said that.
He's also accusing, doubting Utinda Molo's education. You stop that, because it's not right. But let me just tell you, you cannot have that argument, Bonnie, without putting names. And you know, we said choices have consequences. You cannot have a minister of sport that, for example, and I have nothing against the Cheza, by the way. I don't play those village politics anymore, so I just come to Debarl's show. Let me tell you that you can't be a minister of sports just because you were a boxer. That's why we get this thing wrong. This country, you know, you have just read to Kenyans, Debarl, that Kenya will surpass the rest of Africa in manpower, in just but just by UN standards, by international standards. So we are not lacking of manpower, Bonnie.
Yes.
And we are not criticizing anybody. We're just saying, once you are a minister, we have to look at you. You are a public figure. We have even we would, the same way we would look at Aaron Cheriot or Jacomidi. We are all public figures. And I think it's good to criticize. This is our government. There is no other country. And when somebody is wrongly constituting it, we must criticize. What they have done, the Jubilee government, is to constitute the government wrongly. The way Dr. Eseli says, Kenya has enough manpower. We can look good. We can choose to look good. Or we can choose to look bad the way we are looking bad. But you have people who are not fit enough to hold those positions as per the spirit of our constitution. That we must talk about, Debarl. And I think that's where the problem is. Sugarcoating it may work,
thank you,
but will not work for a very long time.
Thank you.
It was unfair for Khalwale to compare Eugene Wamalwa and whoever was the Minister for Devolution.
Anne Waiguru.
Remember, the Ministry of Devolution was really, most departments were removed, including planning, the Central Bureau of Statistics, and all those. So that it was just left a skeleton. That's probably why Waiguru appeared more powerful than what Eugene is, because what he has got there is a skeleton. It's not the ministry as it was before. So I think it's wrong to make that comparison.
Okay. But let me clarify.
Let's hear from Motene Amolo, please.
Let me clarify, because Dr. Halwale, who is a trained medical doctor, but branched into bullfighting, but has recently become politically itinerant, and also somewhat politically intolerant. Let me clarify to him the question that was posed. The word technocrat does not appear in the Constitution. What Article 152 does is to say that the President shall appoint cabinet secretary who shall not be members of parliament. That is all it does. The idea that the technocrat, there would be technocrats was an idea that was born when we were working on the Constitution. And the assumption was that if you are given the latitude not to appoint people from inside parliament, then we will try and look for the best in those fields. And most likely then they will be technocrats. But speaking for myself, my brother asked about my qualifications. I am one of those whom he vetted twice. When I was going to the committee of experts, when I was going to be ombudsman. So he's well aware of my qualifications. But in case his memory is now failing, if you went to the graduation list of 2014 of Maseno University, then you will find my name.
All right.
But for
so,
me,
we'll take a
I think
break
people must defend not based on titles. I am one of those who believe that even without title, you can still be a good cabinet secretary, but provided you are actually able to perform.
Right, thank you. No. We will respond. We want to take a short break right now. And when we come, we circle back also. We shall look at what is on the front page of the Star today. Are we gagging for another Eurobond? Right, this is what is on the front page of the Star this morning. 250 million shillings, right, being sought there. There are debt fears, it says, of a new 250 billion shillings Eurobond. Treasury PS Kamau Tuge confirms plan to borrow despite experts warning. And this story is tucked on page 4 of the Star. Local and external loans and grants to fill 622 billion shillings budget shortfall. That is a deficit. And we want to continue with that discussion with our panelists on the other side of the break. Don't go away. Remember our Twitter handle, AM Live NTV is our Twitter handle, AM Live NTV, our profile name on Facebook. Remember to give us a thumbs up there. And 20686, our SMS portal. We'll take a short break right now. Welcome back. You're watching People and Politics here on AM Live, and the conversation continues apace with our panelists. We're discussing a raft of issues as far as the rough and tumble of politics is concerned in the country. And also we have reactions here on Twitter. We have Mugo John Davis saying, has a very good, Boni Mtetezi has a very good observation. The National Assembly represents the face of Kenyan people and should be thorough during voting. Unfortunately, the Assembly is a rubber stamp for the power that be. Also, we have Wanjiku Mugane saying, but you voted them before they came into office. Who is to blame? You MPs for failing Kenyans by putting people to just sit in office. Also, we have Rashid Swale saying, it's interesting that Boni Mtetezi does not want people like Jakoyo to mention that his friend and tribesman Rashid Echesa regarding matters of education, yet we all know the truth about his education's credentials. We must get serious as a country. Joseph Odanga Ja Osihanda is saying today's discussion is interesting. The truth is Uhuru's cabinet is nothing near being technocratic. Some CSs only have birth certificates while others have dubious qualifications. This is what Joseph is saying. And also we have Faiba Katwi saying it's true, the existence is harm to the country's economy. I also know a governor, all right, I don't need to mention names there, but those are your reactions on Twitter as well. Also, I also know Governor Joho and Gideon. More, I think others do not work in Kenya but are paid by Kenyans or are the ghost workers.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You must mention that.
Okay.
I want to clarify my defense of Minister Echesa. Nothing personal. We are all men and women of this world coming from Kenya. This focus on Echesa is unfair to the young man, to the extent that we are forgetting a whole plethora of governors who by law are expected to have degrees. But they have lied their way into office. They are today, as we speak, in office. Some of them have been challenged in court to clarify the education. So what's wrong with Echesa? Who made it public on who he was? And so that the country can know how unfair Honorable Jakoyo is. Honorable Jakoyo, your education background, if you are attacking Echesa, you should also tell the country your own education background.
An accountant profession.
Yes, you went to,
right, I think we
went to Dori Primary School, then we went to Sawagongo High School, and what is on record here is that you are currently a student undergoing MPA accounting option. So you should tell us, since you are a student undergoing accounting, when you came into public office, what were you? You cannot just crash Echesa as if you are a PhD.
Can I clarify that, because he is accusing me directly?
Okay.
I'm reading from your own biodata.
Let me just tell you.
You know,
so why are you doing
this
that?
argument is not useful.
It's not useful because you
can
check that I have a degree.
It does not. A degree is not a vaccination against idiocy and stupidity. Yeah. I know.
But Bonnie, you're not being fair to me.
No, just a moment.
If you are unfair to
okay.
I am not. I'm here.
Okay.
Why do you need to?
I don't want this. This is your biodata.
This is biodata.
Okay, we do want to derail. That is not the topic of the day, truly. Yeah? But you can clarify, Jacobi, then we move on.
Degree from University of District of Columbia, accounting, BS in accounting. So if Bonnie wants my certificate, I can send it to them.
Why is it not here?
I don't know. I never put that.
Okay. All right. Can we hear from Senator?
That's not right.
There's something Dr. Isaiah said.
Okay, just a moment. Bonnie and I think I'll separate the two of you today.
Yes. No, we are not fighting. No, Bonnie is not being fair to me.
You are not being fair to Rashid.
All right.
Because he's illiterate.
Okay, let's hear from Aaron Cheriot. Okay, Aaron Cheriot.
Yes,
please.
You know, there's something.
Why?
Jacob, please. Jacob, hold your horses.
There's something that Dr. Oselia said. I don't know if it was in defense of Echesa or just by mentioning, which is a very good point, that a degree is not a vaccination against stupidity and idiocy. You know, and on this one, perhaps the person who can best answer this question is Otiende, because he sat in the committee that wrote the Constitution. When you didn't put the qualifications for cabinet secretary to want to be a graduate and that kind of thing, then I would wish to believe that you would be on the forefront defending Rashid Echesa and saying, criticize him for anything else about his performance, but not about his education. Because at that time, when you sat and drafted the constitution, you never saw it as important for one to be a graduate. Then I think the point here that you should be making is that, are we trying to say that the most educated, for example, of cabinet secretaries are the best performing? It's not true. We have evidence to confirm that some of the best educated people don't perform well when it's a whole combination of so many other things, education being just one of them. Therefore, for example, if you want to criticize Rashid on his education, well, that might be fine, but the other qualities and attributes that he brings to the ministry that are far much outweighs his inabilities with regards to education.
Right, thank you. Yeah. Let's hear from Dr. Seli and we wind it up, unless
I think people like, if we are going to go that direction, you remember that people like Albert Einstein were thrown out of school for being unteachable. But they see what they did for the world. People like Churchill. Churchill was a great leader in the UK. And then look at the what we call the Silicon Valley. I mean, what we have coming out of there. Who are the people who have been in charge? Steve Jobs and so on. These are people who even left college because they found that what they were being taught in college was not useful to them. So I think, yes, the education has a certain amount or it can help to an extent, so long as it has exposed the person well enough to be able to comprehend what is required in life. I think that's what we should look at. It's because if it's just education for the sake of certificates, and that's the problem in Kenya right now, to the extent that we have even merchants selling certificates on River Road, because we are so obsessed with certificates. Those certificates could be fake, they could be actually genuinely got, but just concentrating in a classroom and getting a string of degrees does not make you capable of running a ministry. Running a ministry is a totally different ballgame.
Thank you.
I think the question is, as you select these people, what criteria are you using? Don't just select anybody because you have the majority in parliament and you will pass that person. Even if that person is not going to perform, whether he has a PhD or is a nursery school dropout, kindergarten dropout, it doesn't really matter. It's what abilities does this person bring on board.
Thank you. Right, finally, let's hear from Dr. Otiende Amolo.
I think let's not lose the debate. The original debate was the idea of cabinet secretaries being technocrats and have they performed. And I think the point we were making first is that, strictly speaking, the cabinet secretaries we have cannot be described as technocrats because some may not fit that bill. But that is when Dr. Boni Halwale then removed it from that debate to the personal. But the second point, and I've considered this, Senator Chiriot, that I believe that the overriding question should be performance, not necessarily qualification. Exactly. But in performance, the question then must be asked, are you sufficiently educated to understand the job that you need to do? Say you are the cabinet secretary for finance and you want to explain away the budget. Will you take a person who cannot read to explain that budget? Will it even make sense? So even that performance and understanding can be matched to some level of education. It does not need to be the highest level. But the third bit is, in terms of parity of reasoning and rationale, if we are a country that believes we are so sufficiently educated that even members of parliament must now have a degree, and you'll remember, Senator Cheriot, that actually that law was passed previously. It's when we went to President Kibaki, he declined to sign it. In this 11th parliament, the law was passed, but at the last minute, members of parliament actually postponed it to apply now. So my understanding is, in fact, is that moving forward right now, until and unless that law is amended, you require to have a degree to be elected to parliament as we speak. Dr. Sele, I believe that is the position. Now, if that is the case, and we've even debated and said even MCAs should have a certain minimum level of education, I think the suggestion was that it must, right now, it must be post-secondary, some sort of post-secondary certificate. Then can you be a country that requires so much of MCAs and so much of MPs and nothing of cabinet secretaries? It is true that Article 152 does not expressly require. The assumption is made in terms of either parliament making that determination or the appointing authority. So I think let's not mix the issues here. The issue here, we were saying, we were questioning the performance of some cabinet secretaries. And I think we made the point that some it could be on account of capacity, some it could be on account of allegiance to only the president, some it is on account of the feeling that they don't have to be accountable to parliament because they're not in parliament. But the combination and combination of all this, and that's what I hear the panel to be saying, is that we may need to reconsider a situation where cabinet secretaries feel more accountable to the people, to parliament, not just to the president. And although it was not expressly said, I think Jacoyo said it though, that that kind of thinking tends to sit well with a parliamentary system rather than a presidential system.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, and Debarl, just to put everything in perspective, without me and Bonnie arguing so much, let me say that I think it is very wrong to invest as heavily in education systems as Kenya is doing and not expect people who have gone through that system to be given the right jobs. Because I'm a believer. I've been a member of parliament for 15 years. And I invested so much of our resources in education. And it does not make sense to me that an educated person like Bonnie Halwale would think it is not important to go to school. That people who have not gone to school can just get by. You know, this issue, even with governors having fake degrees and all that, we need to deal with it. We can't have people going to River Road and buying certificates and going through the system. It's not good example for our children. Going to the future, we must believe in education because only educated people can help themselves.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, let's bring it to a close and we look at other matters right now. Before we took a short break, we actually headlined what is on the front page of the Star this morning, and we wanted also to discuss this. Are there bugbears and fears in regard to debt? Right, debts, fears over new 250 billion shillings Eurobond. Treasury PS Kamau Thuge confirms plan to borrow despite experts warning, and this is on the page 4 of the Star this morning. Let's just throw it in first of all, because I think they've been telling Kenyans that we've not really crossed the red line, but we saw also the World Bank warning in regard to this, you know, the debt burden that we are actually carrying as a country. That was just last week in the Business Daily as well. But we can begin with you, Aaron Cheriot. Should we go for another Eurobond? The first one, you've not been actually succinctly told how it worked and where it went. The second one as well. And this will be the third one. There were also, you know, rumors that, yes, and also, yeah, speculations about the Sukuk bond that the government wanted also to, you know, prepare documentation so that now we can align our laws with Islamic laws so that actually we can also tap into the Middle East market as far as Islamic bond is concerned.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think on this one, I feel totally not prepared to engage. The reason is, I've tried to read, and one of the first stories that I read when you came in this morning was this story on page 4 and 5 of the Star. The debt fears of the new 250 Eurobond debt. I expected a proper explanation as to, one, the reason for borrowing, and two, the reason why we want to override the warning that has been given to us by very credible institutions last week and what we have been reading. Of course, there is general concern by members of the public, including the people that we represent, that our appetite for loans is getting to a level that soon might not be sustainable. And therefore, this is extremely worrisome. I want to perhaps seek additional info to understand why anybody will want to continue to borrow, despite the fact that this is something that even if you walk down the street and listen to anyone, both laymen and the educated, about this thing, we all agree that a time has come for us to have a discussion about this debt. Yet all the pros and cons have been given to us, the reason why to borrow and why not to borrow, whether it's good or bad. But we have gotten to a point where we've said, hey, enough is enough. Until we first reap from what we have borrowed, I think we should put to a stop. Of just know for a fact, for example, that for this quarter, the quarter that has just ended of a financial year, our repayment of debt tripled for something about 60 billion last year to 150 billion. that we've just repaid. Of the 352 billion that Treasury collected in the last 3 months, 153 went to repaying debt. Therefore, I do not think it's good management by the team at Treasury to go back and borrow, given the fact that our counties are struggling, business hasn't, government hasn't even begun processing its business because of lack of funding. Because everything, if you're paying, if for every 10 shillings that government is collecting right now, 5 shillings is going to repay debt, surely what audacity does Treasury have to borrow again? For me, I think it's a move in the right direction and something that I would vehemently oppose. If I was in the National Assembly, like Eseli and Otiende, this will make good ground for either a motion of censure or probably seeking additional info from Treasury about what they're about to do.
All right. Do you think maybe our conscience is really seared as far as borrowing is concerned right now? That even in regard on what people raise questions about the first, the second Eurobond, we still go full steam ahead even for another one, and even now we'll even think about even the Sukuk bond as well.
I think the adage that when you are in a hole you stop digging applies to us very much right now. We are in a hole, we should stop digging. Others will just sink deeper. As matters stand, it shows that we've actually mismanaged our economy, in the sense that if these huge budgets we've been having every year, $1 trillion plus, if this money was really doing the right thing in the economy, then we would have built the economy to an extent where we don't need even to borrow. But right now, even collecting taxes, we are not expanding that, because we virtually, the goose that lays the golden egg, we are actually on the verge of actually killing the goose itself. That's the people who pay taxes. So what we are seeing here is a result of the mismanagement of the economy. Because if we followed where this money goes, because a lot of this money is stolen, it's in people's pockets, and we see it being given out in Harambes and things like that. If we really, and I'm sure if the government wants it, they know where this money is. So instead of borrowing, just go for this money and bring it back into the economy. Instead of just letting it out there, then you borrow some more, steal some more, and we just get into a vicious cycle, and eventually it will burst. The bubble will burst. And when it does, Kenya will be in trouble. Because as matters stand now, let's face it, we have not been employing, the public service has not been employing for quite a while, despite the high unemployment rate. Because there's no money to, they say, the wage bill. But actually, I argue that it's not the wage bill, it's the debt that's the problem in this country. Now we want to increase that debt again, so that we can service certain things that we want to do, which are having no impact on the economy, to stimulate the economy. Because if they had a positive impact on the economy, we would have seen it now. 5 years down the line, with Jubilee in power, we should have seen some change. But what we see is difficult. I mean, I think we have a big problem here. And borrowing, I don't think is the solution. I don't think borrowing more is the solution. We are in a hole, we stop digging.
So what will be the remedial measure maybe to
the remedial measure, I've said, they know where the money has gone. They know who is holding this money. Go for it and bring it back instead of borrowing.
Who knows?
The system. I mean, the government.
Which is the system? We are talking about the deep state or which system?
Yeah, the deep state.
The deep state.
The deep state.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's hear from
the deep
Molo.
state knows where the money is.
Well, I think that anybody rationally looking at the situation must agree that we are fast moving in the absolutely wrong direction, and we are shuttling to disaster. In 2012, the entire total debt was less than, I think it was about 1.6 billion.
Trillion.
1.6 trillion, sorry. Right now, we are talking of almost of around 5 trillion in those very few years. And that was the total debt since independence. That direction can only lead to one thing, and that is disaster. We have said this all the time. We even said this before the last election. We said it in shows. We said it everywhere. But at that time, no one would listen. First, Parliament and members of Parliament from the Jubilee side kept saying that the borrowing is sustainable. I am happy now a lot of them are waking up to the reality that maybe what we were saying should have been listened to at that time. The IMF itself and the Bretton Woods institutions at that time kept encouraging the government, and they were saying Kenya's borrowing is sustainable. Then they wake up one day and say it is no longer sustainable, but they don't tell us at what point they came to that conclusion. The truth is they should have given that warning earlier. But more importantly is that even the first and initial issues of Eurobond, it is important to note that to date, the audit queries have not been resolved. To date, there is no audit of Eurobond 1 or Eurobond 2 that have been presented anywhere that people can see whether indeed what we borrowed even came into the country. So the point that Senator Cheruiyot is making is a good point. He's made it late, but he's made it nevertheless, that there is need to ask some very fundamental questions around this borrowing first before we can even agree to it. Now, but what's most important is that Parliament and my colleagues in the National Assembly are all now starting to see the reality. The reality is dawning on them irrespective of political persuasion, and members of the National Assembly are starting to say, and as I understand it, the budget, the Finance and Budget Committee is starting to take a position which they should have taken earlier, that all public borrowing ought to be approved by the National Assembly and the justification ought to be understood and where this money is going, because it does not make sense. How do you explain that we borrowed so much in very few years, but even the members of Parliament from the Mount Kenya region then come on national TV and say that they are concerned that they're not getting in terms of development for water, roads, electricity, agriculture? Isn't it a contradiction? Yes. The rest of the country, therefore, we are way behind in the queue, so that even the strength to complain may not be there. But it tells you that there's a fundamental problem when you keep borrowing and that money cannot be seen anywhere. Yes.
Jacob Medio? Yes. Debarl, I would be shocked if the government would believe that they can borrow further. You know, at 5.1 trillion, it means we are in debts that even kids who are unborn 10 years to come will inherit a lot of debt. You know, last week, the IMF said the Kenya shilling was overvalued by 15.5%. Overvalued. So in other words, it means somebody is not doing the right thing. The Eurobond that we borrowed, I can say here very comfortably that I was in Parliament then and I dealt with that issue, that the money never got to Kenya, and that the 600 and something million dollars, which was said to have paid a syndicated loan, that money was stolen. The thieves are known. The money is in the banks in the Middle East somewhere. Unless we do what Dr. Esel is saying, we are going to have a lot of problems in this country. You know, to borrow, to build SGR, don't you think we could have postponed the SGR if we had to do it with the debt? I mean, it is the only railway line on earth which does not terminate in any town. But we have used nearly 400 billion shillings, which is just stolen, quite frankly. Is it not possible that even when we were, I've seen here in the Business Daily, that consumption of paraffin has gone down by 75%. It means we will not be collecting taxes from paraffin, and it is because we opted to increase taxes. So we are borrowing, we are increasing taxes, and the people who are managing our economy largely are behaving like they know it all. Like, I really feel sad about our country, because I don't think it is the right thing to do. We talked about it here about a month ago, and I can tell you, with the borrowing and the increment in taxes, in about 8 to 10 months, you will not have a country to speak of.
Right.
Borrowing is a good thing, and borrowing is part of one of the ways to manage an economy. However, it is what you do with the borrowed money that counts. In the United States of America after the Second World War, the percentage of debt vis-a-vis the GDP of the US was at its highest. But this started dropping drastically because the money that the US borrowed put into infrastructure, the development that you see in the US when you go there these days, superhighways, rail lines, and what have you, industrializations, to the extent that now when, that was in the 40s, in the 50s, by the time you went into the 70s, the 80s, and 90s, the effect of the borrowed money by way of what now the infrastructure, the factories that built had started pumping into the economy, made the life in the US to be almost like a paradise. Therefore, the problem in Kenya is that when we borrowed 280 billion shillings, Eurobond 1, it was mismanaged. It was not invested. It left us with the egg on the face to the extent that the reason, Kenyans might not know, the reason for Eurobond 2 is because the government of Kenya needed to borrow that 202 billion shillings to retire a syndicated loan from a consortium of banks that were now demanding 100 billion shillings from the government of Kenya. So that money was borrowed, Eurobond 2, and it was used to retire that particular loan. The unfortunate scenario is that we are therefore simply borrowing to pay somebody who we owe. We borrowed 202 so as to offset a loan of 101. This is where the problem is. So we are hoping, and we are lucky that we have got 3 parliamentarians here, that when this matter will come up in Parliament, you should scrutinize it. This money be borrowed when you are absolutely satisfied on our behalf.
Unfortunately, what happens is we do not approve individual loans. They approve a ceiling. So what they did is they hiked the ceiling. So they can play with games so long as they're within that ceiling that Parliament approved.
Big problem, because you should then be reminding Rotich at committee level, and my brother Kamau Thuge, and of course the head of the central bank, that it is a shame that Kenya in the region, we are at the same level of debt with a small funny country which is smaller, almost the size of Kakamega County, called Burundi. Burundi is at 57%, we are at 52%. We should, for lack of a better competitor, at least we could be comparable to Tanzania and maybe Uganda. But they are doing far much better than us. Both of them are in, I think it is 38 for Uganda and 38 for Tanzania. So members of parliament again, my brother Amolo, you cannot run away. As members of parliament, you must put your feet down and call these people to account. Yeah.
So what does this portend? Because now it seems previously also IMF were not really giving good indications as far as this debt burden is concerned. Now they're saying yes, now the external debt distress, we are raising it from low now to moderate. And as it is right now also this refinancing is at risk. Even with this 250 billion shillings, with now that particular raising from low to moderate, that also stands to be questioned if it will really sail through.
I'd wish to say something about this IMF issue. And I think somebody in the panel, I can't remember who, pointed it out that they're appearing to be changing tune at this point in time. I think it was Otiende. And I wouldn't wish that as a country we get caught up also in the global propaganda war. Because the biggest question that comes to mind is that what is it that was so healthy about us borrowing, say, last year when we had the IMF cushion. But the minute we relieved ourselves of it and said we do not need it, we now have become risky as an institution. This is all part of the Western powers that be. Propaganda war sometimes, where you're only good when you're with them, but when you no longer appear to be properly adhering to their whims and tunes, you are now risky and not good to do business with. IMF may be a reputable institution, but you've got to remember that at the end of the day, they're an enterprise just like any other. And therefore, whatever information they give you, you need to always counter-check. Second thing that I think we urgently need to do, in part of what is just being proposed, I think, by Eseli, the part of stopping to dig. This question, and I raised it here a few weeks ago, where the cost of running government is considered to be extremely high. And unfortunately, each time Kenyans are treated to this debate, the finger is pointed to what it takes that it is their representatives that are expensive to keep in office and that kind of thing. I've always said that debate is dead in the wood, because if you look at our budget projections for 2018-2019, the whole system of county governments together with their representatives, and even the legislature inside there, cost something in the region of 350 billion, 314 to counties, and about 40 billion shillings to run our legislature. Therefore, the cost, the bigger cost, of course, given that the sheer size of responsibility government has to carry, if there's to be any meaningful budget cuts and reduction, then it is on the size of the executive and the things that you're taking. Some of the projects that national government is undertaking, the bigger question we need to be asking right now is, are they, yes, they may be necessary, but must it be done now and now, or can we wait for the economy to first recover from what appears to be a slump? Mark you, many of our counties, as we speak today, are yet to receive their first quarter allocation for this financial year. That even paying salaries, some of them have had to borrow because of how tough things are. And therefore, when you get to that point, then you need to have a bigger discussion about it, because all that is happening is that you're stifling the economy. The small micro enterprises that depend on county governments to operate, for example, it tells you that they haven't been paid because, you know, government stops paying around the month of June. So you can imagine from June up to now, tomorrow we shall be in November, there are suppliers to county governments who've never been paid. How will those businesses be able to survive? And therefore we need a greater discussion about it, on how we share our revenue. That is number one. And also at what time we get to have it. Because 100 shillings or 100 million given today is not similar with that money being sent to you next year, when it is known that you needed it to have it now or you drown. And therefore there's good reason to say that our discourse nationally about how we are managing our economy is wanting, and something better needs to be done about it.
So we've got reasons to worry, and if we may just go by also the editorial cartoon that we have today in the People Daily, this is what Stano has drawn for us today. Corruption dock. If you may look at that corruption dock, you can see all manner of people who are in the corruption dock as far as scandals are concerned. NYS, NCPB, MOH, we have KPLC, we have also KPL, and now joining the new kid in the block now is the Government Advertising Agency. But we need to ask ourselves, this money that we are borrowing, because we're given to understand it's going to some very interesting projects as well. First of all, the purchase of MRI equipment, procuring power materials, rehabilitation of technical equipment. We have modernization of Kenya power distribution system, and also building Kenyatta University. I mean, manner of borrowings that we're talking about, we're not really talking about this particular Eurobond that they're seeking, but the kind of borrowing that we are actually talking about, vis-a-vis the cartoon that we are seeing. If we combine all those scandals that we do have, and the billions of shillings that have been lost through that, Aren't we able to actually purchase MRI equipments for the counties?
In fact, we should not purchase
Aren't we able to actually procure power materials as it is listed? Aren't we able also to rehabilitate technical universities with equipment, modernization of Kenya power distribution system, and even building, continue to build the Kenyatta University as it is put here also in the Business Daily by Jaindi Kaisero as well?
I think this one, like the purchase of MRI, is wrong-headed.
It's actually CT scans, not MRI.
Even if it's CT scan or MRI, but no, they are not.
It is wrong. Why is it wrong-headed?
The project is called LIST. It is a county that is leasing from national government.
Listen to what has happened here.
Yes.
They leased medical equipment up to the scalpel, the scissors that they use in theater. When it came to the high-end equipment, like CT scans and MRI, they are buying. You see, that's what I'm saying. It's complete. They flipped everything over. Usually, in other countries,
you lease the MRI.
High technology equipment that keeps on changing, like MRI, CT scan, those are the ones that you lease. While the low-end equipment, you buy. But in this case, we flipped it over. We bought the we leased the low-end equipment, and the high-end equipment we are buying. And shock to you, we are buying this equipment from China. China is not the originator of this equipment. So we are getting generics from China at a very high cost. At a very high cost. Instead of them, why don't you go to the original manufacturers of this and buy from this at the same price? So you'll be surprised the amount of money that's going into this CT scan, MRI, whatever, and it's not leasing, it's buying. So they flipped everything over. Now, if you want to improve KPLC's distribution of power, what is KPLC doing with their own money? It's supposed to be an enterprise that's generating revenue for KPLC.
Which is running as a monopoly right now.
When they improve distribution, they get more money. So why are we giving them money? They should use their own money to do this. Because they are overcharging people. The electricity bills we are getting are humongous. They should be able to do this themselves. Why should we borrow money for KPLC?
Why should we build also...
something on this.
Okay.
Dr. Eseli and I sit in the Public Accounts Committee. And in the current year, we have been looking at the question of the lease of medical equipment. And there was this program by national government where it leased medical equipment and sent to the counties. And we were looking at its effectiveness. In fairness, although, and we cannot discuss the report yet because we are yet to make it, but all I can say is that having gone around a few of the counties, it emerged that actually the idea of leasing the equipment is a good idea. But what is in question was the mode of procurement and the cost of leasing. And some of the equipment that were leased, you go to some of those hospitals and you find they are not in use, and yet there's a monthly pay. So there's quite enough to say about that. But I think the fundamental question is this. Why do you borrow? Even in ordinary life, you do not borrow to finance the normal things that you want to borrow because you now want to take, you want to take a holiday somewhere, or you want to borrow because you want to buy a suit. You must borrow if there's a fundamental reason. And on this I agree with Dr. Seli completely. If you look at any of those, including the idea of, the greater reach for electricity, one of the very curious things that have happened, and I'm sure my colleagues saw this, and you probably saw this, I think in the last 3 years, there's been these curious trends where you see these poles, the wooden poles for electricity, new, strong, then they're all being replaced with a concrete one. Not because there's need, but because somebody somewhere had started manufacturing those concrete poles and there was need to now get money to pay them. So it is a complete misinvestment. Why would you borrow to give an entity like that money to do what it need not do in the first place? Why not wait and phase them out as they rot or become old? Why pluck them out? And in almost all those cases, because they had nowhere to take them, they'll just leave the pole there lying, rotting, and maybe some people taking and burning charcoal and all that. So the point is, the rationale for borrowing has not been demonstrated. And where that money goes has not come to pass and demonstrated well. Secondly, we are now in a situation where I think we are borrowing more, we are taxing more, so there is no money in the country. Then we continue to borrow and we still need to pay. As far as I understand, I think by early this year, of every 100 shilling earned, 60 shilling was going to pay money that is borrowed. So the more you borrow, the more you'll have to repay. So it will move from 60 to 100. What that means is that the amount that is left to run the country becomes thinner and thinner. And with higher taxation, then it just disappears. The fundamental thing that we must do, and this is where, and I agree with Boni Halwale on this, and Senator Cheruiyot, we in the National Assembly must now do what we needed to have done earlier. The problem with this thing of borrowing is that it became intertwined with politics, the politics of Jubilee and NASA. So that as long as we're in NASA, anything you said about borrowing was untrue. As long as we're in Jubilee, anything you said about justifying borrowing was true. What then was lost is the provisions of Article 201 and Article 211. In Article 201, one of the things that is expected of us is to make sure that we use resources prudently and manage public borrowing so that it is equitably shared between the present and future generations. We are dangerously putting the future generations at risk. Now, under Article 211, Parliament is supposed to take a greater role, and we must revisit the provisions. The Finance and Budget Committee must now do what Article 211 says, and it's very particular. It requires Parliament to prescribe the terms on which national government may borrow. It also now requires Parliament to impose reporting requirements. And the committee is allowed to summon the Cabinet Secretary anytime, who within 7 days must come and report to the committee, which in turn must report to the House on the use that any money that was borrowed was put to. He must report on why there is need to borrow. So Article 211 gives us the answers that we need, but which we have not used. I suggest that this is the time when we as Parliament, through the Committee on Finance and Committee, must summon the Cabinet Secretary to start by demonstrating, first, the use to which all the previous Eurobonds were put.
Precisely.
And secondly, to justify why there is need to borrow again. And therefore, to have a situation where the National Assembly can, and even the Senate if need be, can actually regulate much more closely. Because this window is a window that has been misused. And if we continue this way, we may as well wind up as a country.
Thank you. Thank you. Jacob Midio.
Need I say more? I think Otiende has put it so clearly. You know, Debarl, when the 10 years of Kibaki, it almost seemed unbelievable that we were headed the right direction. But the 5 years of Jubilee government have taken us back to Moi days. And that is just a fact. How I wish we could resolve the issue of incompetence in leadership. Because I do not think, I said here a few weeks ago, that I took my time to watch the NASA campaign rhetorics and the Jubilee campaign rhetorics and their manifestos. None of them in the last elections spoke about the economy. And it is a very sad thing for our country. Because had they addressed the issues of the economy, Parliament would probably be thinking differently, because that process gave us members of Parliament, senators and National Assembly members. They would have been chosen based on the ideas they were talking about. But we never got there. And how nice would it be that this country would begin to talk about our economy, the leadership, Parliament. I'm happy what I'm hearing from the members of Parliament here. I'm very happy, because I think the sycophancy must stop somewhere. And I think it is good for Parliament as a body, as an independent body, to know that Treasury is incompetent in matters economy. And the sooner the President reshuffle the constitution of the way the Treasury is constituted, all these people have worked for IMF. And what they are doing, it's like they are there to finish this country. Their policies, and I think there's like a group of 6 or 7 of them. They are all from IMF.
Thank you.
And I think it is not good for our country.
Right. Boni Halwale, on this, then we begin to wind up.
I think my colleagues have prosecuted it very well. This is an area where we are all in agreement. My comment is only one. The intention to invest in specialized medical equipment by the government was laudable and is still laudable. However, it was not well thought through. What we needed was to invest in the 11 former provincial hospitals, ranging from Kakamega to Machakos to Nyanza to Embu and so on. Only the 11. You invest in those ones. Once you do that, you ensure we have enough specialists to operate that equipment so that they are in use. When they then overdid it took it to all the 47 counties, it is when the problem began. I personally visited Lamu to follow the specialized medical equipment. They not only didn't have medical experts to man those equipment, but they didn't even have where to store the equipment. So part of the equipment was lying outside. It is that terrible because somebody wanted to make quick money. And that members of public accounts are here. Please go and take that issue of medical equipment seriously. It is a serious scandal where 38 billion shillings was used on a project that should have cost 22 billion shillings.
Thank you. Right, let's just begin winding up with you, Aaron Cheriot.
There are 2 or 3 things that I want to say, Debarl.
Let's take 2. We are winding up.
Unfortunately, 1, we are pressed for time, and 2, it's a bit controversial. Therefore, I don't know whether this is the right time to raise it. But my thinking on how the economy is currently performing and the war on corruption, the way it is being executed.
Yes.
Is there a correlation? Could it be to a larger extent that we have government officials who are intentionally going out of their way to ensure that nothing moves on the system just to try and frustrate this war, either rightfully or wrongfully about it? Rightfully in the sense that they may not be in total agreement of how the war is being executed. And then there's something that Dr. Eseli, you said about some of this money that has disappeared being seen in Harambes. I do not agree with you on that, because I think, to the best of my knowledge, thieves are hardly ever generous. In fact, those who are stealing from us, they do not give this money publicly.
Thank you. Dr. Eseli, your parting shots, briefly.
Harambee is one of the main drivers of corruption in this country. However, I was going to say that this medical leasing equipment is a problem, because you find in the Ministry of Health, there's a budget for leasing this equipment. Then you find the counties are being deducted money for leasing this equipment. There's some double payment somewhere. And I keep on saying this, and I repeat it until the cows come home. Come 2022, Kenyans should avoid Jubilee like the plague. They have messed up the economy, they have messed up the farmer, they have just messed up everything. Anything Jubilee, anybody associated with Jubilee, Kenyans should avoid like the plague come 2022.
Thank you. Right, let's hear from also Dr. Otiende.
My closing shot is that given the handshake and the developing scenario where even as members of parliament we are starting to see things much more objectively, we should use this opportunity to fix the things that we need to fix, like not allowing government too much leeway in terms of borrowing and misuse. We need to retake that space. But at the same time, my colleagues from Mount Kenya who met and are starting to have an agenda that is regional, that even considerations in terms of sharing of revenue should be adjusted to fit a region. That is a language we want to avoid.
Thank you.
We want a language that is more national, that is more inclusive.
Thank you.
In the spirit of the handshake.
Right, Jacob Medio, your parting shots?
Harambes are the major cause of corruption in our country. That's the direction Nyayo took it, and we are in this hole. When you see somebody walking into a church and giving 8 million shillings and his salary is $1 million, then you know there is a problem. we must, Senator Cheriot, I know who you are defending.
But you see, salary
right, no, Senator. Jacob Medio, your parting shots. We'll jump over now to Boni Halwale.
I'm just saying we need to reorganize our society, deal with the thieves. There's enough money in the country, except we must stop the thievery.
Your final thoughts, sir.
Yesterday, the Auditor General reported to the country the level of wastage of money within counties and the amount of thieving that goes on in there, and he itemized showing the order of which country is the biggest culprit. It's unfortunate that Kakamega was one of them at number 5. I want to use this opportunity to urge Senator Cheruyot and your colleagues in the Senate. You must make a deliberate effort to live to your billing as an oversight institution.
Thank you.
Why is all this going on?
Thank you. Thank you very much, our panelists. We appreciate your input this morning, and of course, looking keenly at the rough and tumble of politics and the issues at hand as far as, of course, the debt of Kenya is concerned. That is external debt. Are we hurtling to a crisis right now? That is a question that is begging, and of course, we'll look keenly on this and the raft of other issues as well next week. Thank you for your valued company. My name is Debarl now.